Ce jour-là, chacun à Beyrouth croit qu'il est lui-même visé. Moi, j'ai cru que c'était une nouvelle explosion contre moi.
Everybody believed that the bomb exploded just next to him. So we thought the same. I mean, we went out looking where is the bomb, and then there was no bomb, and after some minutes we saw the smoke coming from the port. You have to see it, otherwise you will not believe it.
وبالنهاية بعدين غادرنا وشفنا فانه كانك فعلا اذا بدك يعني بجهنم للامانه الحقيقه.
ما في اضطرات مسكره، مشوا على المستشفى مشي.
La ville rentrant dans un cercueil dont elle n'est pas sortie.
That a massive explosion shook Lebanon's capital, Beirut. More than 100 people have died. More than 4,000 have been injured.
Die Ursache ist noch nicht geklärt.
Un incendie aurait provoqué l'explosion de 2700 tonnes de nitrate d'ammonium stocké dans le port.
2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate.
والوحيد اللي كان قادر ينزل نترات امونيوم على المرفأ هو حزب الله.
Rien ne se fait au port de Beyrouth sans que le Hezbollah ne sache ce qui se passe.
هاي النتوات هاي لحزب الله، وحزب الله جابها، وحزب الله مخزنها 6 سنين، وحزب الله. أنا أود أن أؤكد اليوم، أن أعلن وأؤكد نفياً قاطعاً مطلقاً حاسماً أنه ما في شيء لإلنا بالمرفأ.
The Hezbollah is a political party, that it is a social movement. It is also a massive militia, larger, better armed, better trained than Lebanese armed forces. It is an international terrorist organization.
Hezbollah made Al-Qaeda look like the minor leagues. We determined during Project Cassandra that Hezbollah was operating like a global drug cartel.
We viewed them as one of the most significant transnational criminal organizations / cartel / mafia that we had ever come across.
Hezbollah's dangerous. Hezbollah's big. Hezbollah's not 10 feet tall.
The shadow of Hezbollah lies over the Beirut port explosion, and any investigation seems impossible. It's as if this Islamist organization had divine impunity. For 40 years, its members have infiltrated Lebanese politics and defied justice. These Shia Muslims dream of establishing religious law, Sharia, like in Iran. Yet, in the mid-2000s, several agents from the DEA, the US Drug Enforcement Administration, tried to secretly bring down Hezbollah. They investigated across 4 continents, revealing the hidden face of what's called the Party of God, before also coming up against its untouchable nature. Their operations codename was Cassandra, like the Greek goddess who foresaw misfortune, but whom nobody heeded. Their investigation started in the US, in the still smoking ruins of the World Trade Center.
I'm a former agent with the Drug Enforcement Administration, known as the DEA in the United States. I worked in the DEA for 28 years. The Drug Enforcement Administration was formed to be the lead agency in America to go after the drug trafficking organizations. I'm from New York. Obviously saw the devastation of 9/11. My brother was in the United States Air Force. He went to Afghanistan to fight for the country, and he came back in a body bag because his helicopter crashed during Operation Enduring Freedom. So I'm very passionate about national security and public safety. So I was actually given a golden opportunity to run the DEA Special Operations Division post 9/11. Jack Kelly is a DEA agent. We recruited him to work at the Special Operations Division. When he first got there, he was working in the Latin America section, which was focusing on Colombia, so he became the leader of the team.
There was a sense of jealousy from others because you were in Special Operations Division. I couldn't say it is the elite, but this was the backbone of how we were taking out cartels in Colombia. I applied to DEA right when I graduated, so all of a sudden you're carrying a gun, you got a badge, you're a federal agent, you're assigned to New York, and you're only 24 years old. So it was a pretty amazing feeling.
This is the battlefield. And this is the enemy. It is a crack epidemic.
Most of the guys I was working with were older than me. It almost seemed like I was a pit bull, and they would unleash me and say, "Go get that guy," you know. And I'd get on these foot chases in Manhattan, some that lasted 3/4 of a mile. I don't think I ever failed at catching my prey. So I'm a supervisor now at Special Operations Division. The idea is to follow the money. So us in an undercover fashion is posing as criminals that know how to launder money, and we would do that for the cartel, and that would afford us to infiltrate cartels to the highest level because we're doing what their bosses consider the most important thing, getting the money back into their hands from the drugs that were sold in places like the Bronx, New York.
شو اخبارك؟ تمام الحمد لله، ماشي حالها، ظبطت موضوع البيعة وكل شيء؟ الفينكا؟ ايه معلوم، كتر خيرك، شو ضربت؟ مبروك، ماشي الحال.
During the wiretap investigations in Colombia, we were intercepting a lot of Arabic conversations. That was something new to me as the head of the Special Operations Division. Like, I didn't really understand it, and I had to learn over the years, like, what was going on.
الو بدي منك معروف ضروري جدا جدا. قول لي بشوف. بدي مرة 20,000 الله يخليك ضروري جدا لها ما في يوم من الليل على بكره الصبح.
The information we're receiving is that Hezbollah as an organization has made a presence in Latin America specifically to be involved in the cocaine trade and cocaine proceed money laundering. One of the top lieutenants is a guy that speaks Arabic, and his name is Taliban. They call him Taliban because they call every Arab guy down there Taliban after 9/11. We do some searches, some quick searches in different databases, and we find out that his name is Chekri Harb. And Chekri Harb was known to people in the United States government. Chekri Harb was tied directly to Iran, Hezbollah, and possible terrorist attacks. So what happens is we introduce undercover agents. One of the undercovers is because he's of Lebanese descent, speaks Arabic fluently, and is actually gonna meet Chekri in Colombia. So Chekri Harb tells the undercover, I move multi-ton loads of cocaine to Port Aqaba in Jordan, and then it gets moved through Syria into Lebanon. Says, well, I imagine then you must be pretty close to Hezbollah if you're gonna be moving cocaine through Syria and Lebanon. Chekri Harb just smiles widely and nods his head, yes, I am working with Hezbollah. So Chekri Harb says to the undercover, we have a project for you. We have $20 million that needs to be laundered. Can you do that for us? The undercover says, certainly we can do that for you.
Our undercover agent did such a good job convincing them that he was this real bad guy. They offered him the contract to pick up $20 million, which he did. $20 million is a lot of money. I'm not aware of too many, undercover agents picking up $20 million from bad guys.
Now that the undercover appeared to be criminal superstars in the mind of Medellin, perhaps could run operations in the Middle East. So basically, this DEA undercover was going to become the Medellin lieutenant in charge of Middle East cocaine trafficking and money laundering. We have found this incredible new definitive tie between Colombian cocaine trafficking, specifically out of Medellin, to an Islamic extremist terrorist organization that killed more Americans than anybody before 9/11. So this was extraordinary. It was a novel idea, but I think to other people in the United States government, it seemed fanciful because they had never heard of anything like this. And basically, the party line was that Hezbollah was too religious to be involved in drug trafficking.
ماذا يقول الأمريكي للعالم؟ لماذا هو ضد حزب الله؟
بالنسبة للمخدرات نحن نرى أنها حرام، لا يجوز لا شراءها ولا بيعها ولا المتاجرة بها. كيف نتاجر بالمخدرات ونحن لا نؤمن بالمخدرات؟ هذا مش صحيح. أنا سأقول لك سراً أساسياً، أخذنا قرار منذ 30 سنة لا ندخل في أي عمل تجاري لا صغير ولا كبير، لا نحن بشكل مستقل ولا بالتعاون مع أحد. في الأعمال التجارية عادة في فساد، في مشاكل، في مساومات، نحن لا نريد. يقول حزب الله هو متورط في الفساد وتبييض الأموال وكذا من الأمور اللي تعتبر سيئة حتى يشوه سمعتنا، حتى يقنع جماعته وشعبه بأنه هو عم يعمل عمل صالح في مواجهة ناس إرهابيين أو فاسدين.
كل هذه الرصاصات والبنادق والقبضات ودماء الشهداء في فلسطين تقول للعالم كله أن بعد عشرات السنين مساوئ التيئيس قد سقط.
وإلا أين الإرهاب عند حزب الله؟ في العالم كله أين الإرهاب؟ ما في إرهاب، نحن مقاومة. ما بدكم إياه يقاوم؟ حزب الله مقاومة وصادق، وعلى كل حال تجاربنا تدل عليه.
Les combats de Beyrouth ont pris une tournure plus violente, presque aveugle, car on ne sait plus exactement qui se bat contre qui. Les affrontements restent localisés.
On the tracks of the Hezbollah drug traffickers, the agents of the DEA plunged into the bloody, chaotic history of Lebanon, birthplace of the Party of God. As of 1975, Beirut was torn by a civil and religious war between the different communities. Christians, Sunni Muslims, Shia Muslims, Druze, and Palestinians waged an endless war. In June 1982, a new party joined the war, the Israeli army, which invaded Lebanon to fight the Palestinians. The fighting threatened stability in the Middle East. French and American soldiers came to keep the peace. They became the target of an unknown organization which had sworn to rid Lebanon of any foreign presence. The dirty war began.
عندما نشأ حزب الله سنة 1982 كنت أيضا من المؤسسين في حزب الله. لم نكن مقتنعين أن دور الغرب دور إيجابي في لبنان. بطبيعة الحال نتمنى في كل لحظة أن يخرجوا من لبنان وأن لا يؤثروا في الواقع اللبناني.
الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته يا
Beyrouth, à nouveau, ce soir, endeuillée par un terrible attentat, mais cette fois, ce sont les Américains qui étaient visés, en leur propre ambassade. Aux dernières nouvelles, on parlait d'une quarantaine de morts.
J'ai vu subitement un immeuble disparaître. C'était l'ambassade des États-Unis. Premier grand round entre le Hezbollah et les Américains. Les seconds attentats visaient la force multinationale qui était formée d'Américains principalement, mais aussi de Français, de Britanniques et d'Italiens.
We figured it had to have at least 2,000 pounds of TNT. It was observed coming at a high rate of speed from the south of the building, crashed through the gate and through the guard post, and then detonated inside the lobby. There's a crater down there about 30 feet deep and about 40 feet across.
بلبنان كانت تقريبا مثل ما قلت اول عمليه انتحاريه حكم ما كنا شايفينها قبل هلا نهائيا حتى بالمنطقه ما كنا نسمع بعد بالعمليات الانتحاريه حكما حزب الله كان تقريبا هو ادخل هالنوع من الجريمه الى الاراضي اللبنانيه.
بناء للأوامر الصادرة من قائد القوات المسلحة في حزب الله نمضي نفجر أجسادنا نزلزل الأرض تحت أقدام أعدائنا أمريكا وإسرائيل. لبيك يا حزب الله، لبيك يا حزب الله.
بالتأكيد الشهادة تشكل السر الأكبر لنجاحنا، لأن أي معركة تحصل يستهدف الخصم أن يقتلك وينهي حياتك. إذا كنت أنت لا تهتم إذا أنهى حياتك وتريد أن تحقق هدفك، معناها فقد المؤثر الذي يستطيع أن يسيطر عليك فيه.
A suicide bombing is a message, we will stop at nothing. We are smarter than you. You are a big bureaucracy and we can beat you. So France and the United States were on the same boat at this point. You know, we were trying to figure out what is happening in Lebanon. We want to know the names of our enemy. I want a picture. Want to know where they are and how we get to them. And once we find them, we have Delta Force, which I work with very closely, we can go kill them. That was my orders. War for an intelligence officer really, it gets your adrenaline going. This is in 1982, 1983. I was on the border with Lebanon, and that was a real fascination because we were at war. You're seeing the Israeli jets come down the Bekaa, you're driving down the road, and the New Jersey is shelling above you. These Navy bombs, they're as big as Volkswagens. So that was my entree into the Middle East. Hezbollah as a name did not exist in '82. They bring all the disparate groups, Shia groups, together and created a unified resistance.
ولا نريد للاحتلال أن يتعرف عليهم. استفدنا من هذه الفترة حتى نكون بنيتنا، وبعد ذلك بدأنا نعلن أن هذه العمليات تقوم فيها المقاومة الإسلامية. ثم أعلنا بشكل رسمي عن حزب الله في سنة 1985.
Décidée à mettre fin à 13 siècles d'humiliation, la communauté chiite libanaise explose. Aspirée dans le sillage de la révolution iranienne, les extrémistes musulmans libanais fondent un nouveau parti, le Hezbollah, en français, le Parti de Dieu. Les fanatiques, qu'on surnomme déjà les fous de Dieu, ne font aucun mystère de leurs intentions. Nous sommes les soldats de Allah et nous sommes épris de la mort. Nous voulons une république islamique, nous ferons du Liban un nouveau Vietnam.
Remember, 1982 is just not quite 3 years after the Iranian Revolution. And for the Iranian Revolution, one key pillar was the export of the revolution.
The Iranians came to Lebanon and said, look, we will help you if you help yourselves and put a fighting group together. You people know how to shoot guns, you know how to blow stuff up, we will give you the money, we will not interfere, you know how to do it, go do it.
On était pris déjà dans l'engrenage et le Hezbollah était devenu un acteur principal avec le nouveau style, les voitures ou les camions piégés avec des conducteurs suicides. Et ensuite, on est passé à une autre phase, c'est les prises d'otages.
Good morning, everyone. It's the third hijacking this week involving Beirut, and this time the plane and most of the passengers are from the United States. TWA Flight 847 was en route from Athens to Rome this morning when it was hijacked by suspected Shiite Muslims and forced to fly to Beirut. They are beating the passengers. They are beating the passengers. They are threatening to kill them now. They are threatening to kill them now. We want the fuel now. We're standing in front of the TWA Flight 847, only a few feet from the cockpit. I can see Captain John Tesfrake next to one of the gunmen in the cockpit. How do you feel? We'll ask you more questions when the engines are off.
Captain Tesfrake, can you tell me what has happened to you and what's happening to you now?
Not very much is happening to us now.
Can you talk to them? Do they speak English? Can you communicate with them?
Sometimes better than others. It depends on who's on board.
Goodly. Captain, many people in America are calling for some kind of rescue operation.
I think that we'd all be dead men if they did, because we're continually surrounded by many, many guards.
Do you have any thoughts on whether or not the United States should have it?
C'est Imad Mournier qui est dans le cockpit de la TWA.
Mournier was the big point man for Hezbollah's early terrorist activities. He was not a particularly religious person at first. He served as a bodyguard, but went on to become the head of Hezbollah's terrorist operations, in part by being involved in almost everything from the beginning. Here's a guy who was on the kill list of the Mossad, of the CIA for many years.
Mugniya was in the airplane. We found his fingerprint, but that was not Mugniya in the window. He'd never do that, never show his face in public. Never, 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 never. He never showed himself to the hostages because he knew one day he'd be released and he didn't want to be identified. He was a ghost and he knew how to remain a ghost. I planned to kill him.
كانوا مجموعات سرية خفية ما كانت معروفة نهائيا، ما كان العدد كتير كبير، إنما بالنهاية قاموا بمهمات نوعية، مهمات إرهابية كبرى، إنما ما كان التنظيم كتير كبير عدديا.
حزب الله لم يكن لديه أي علاقة بعمليات الخطف ولا بعمليات التفجير التي حصلت للمارينز وللمظليين الفرنسيين.
C'est apparemment sans regret que les GIs quittent le sol libanais pour s'installer à bord des navires de guerre américains qui patrouillent à proximité des côtes.
The Iranians oversaw the most potent asymmetrical military force in modern history, or ever. Don't forget, the French and the Americans were run out by a guy who had about 20 people. In history, there's nothing to compare it with.
Imad Mugnieh and Hezbollah had won. The Americans and French left Lebanon, humiliated and scarred by constant suicide attacks and hostage-taking. But this dirty war of the 1980s left its mark. Since, Washington labeled Hezbollah a terrorist organization, and Imad Mugnieh became a marked man. 20 years later, when the agents of the DEA launched Operation Cassandra, they thought they could avenge those who had died in Beirut and eliminate their old enemy, Imad Mugnieh. The infiltration of Hezbollah's trafficking networks was organized in Jordan. But the agents from the CIA, the American Secret Services, were not happy to see these cowboys on their territory.
Jordanian anti-narcotics police go up on intercepts of numbers identified in Jordan linked to Chekri Harb. And what happened is that there was going to be a big meeting in Amman, Jordan. And at that meeting, Chekri Harb was told to introduce the DEA undercover to an extremely significant member or members of Hezbollah.
فانطونسي هذا قلت لي ساعة قوية وكل شيء فيش مشكلة بالمرة.
حط جرايك بمي مسقعة، بتعرف شو بمسقعة؟
ايه، كون نحن عارفينه منين جاي، هي أهم شيء.
لا ساعة ما تحكرش الهم، من هالناحية ما تحكرش الهم.
ايه.
We were hearing and we believed for various reasons that Harb was under the guidance and protection of Mugnieh. We're under a time crunch now because the undercovers obviously can't move cocaine with Hezbollah and wouldn't be able to launder money for Hezbollah. So we realized that whatever evidence we gain in this Amman, Jordan meeting might be the last chance.
And a day or two before, the meeting was shut down by members of the US Embassy in Jordan. They did not allow the undercover agent to meet with the operatives on the ground in Jordan. And there was no real explanation given, which, to be honest, was very, very annoying and very disturbing. You had folks in the intelligence community that had 30 years of knowledge on Hezbollah pretty much looking down at the DEA, like, how does the DEA know about Hezbollah? DEA became like a fly in their soup.
The undercover reached out to Chekri Harb. Chekri Harb wouldn't talk to him. Chekri Harb wouldn't respond. So he had completely blown off. So we lost our undercover infiltration of Chekri Harb.
So the opportunity was lost. Burned. Not only was the opportunity burned, but our DEA undercover's life was now in big-time danger. As the head of the Special Operations Division, that pissed me off.
The CIA, the American Secret Services, had capsized Operation Cassandra, organized by the DEA, the anti-drug agency. This interdepartmental war showed Washington's weakness, faced with this enemy that had grown and mutated. In the mid-2000s, Hezbollah was no longer a terrorist faction. It passed itself off as a respectable political party, with representatives in the Lebanese parliament that defended the interests of the long ostracized Shia community. They chose their new political leader, Hassan Nasrallah, a cleric trained in Iran. In the shadows, always clandestine, the military leader, Imad Mughnieh, continued leading the war against Israel that was known as resistance. Because, unlike the Westerners who had left the country, the Israeli army still occupied southern Lebanon.
الإسرائيليين والغرب لا يعرفون طبيعة قناعات ومبادئ حزب الله. حزب الله يؤمن بالإسلام، والإسلام مبني على الجهاد. وأنت تعلم أن مسار تصاعدي رغم ازدياد الدول التي تصنفنا إرهاب. نحن لسنا بحاجة لأحد، بحاجة أن نعيد أرضنا ونحرر بلدنا.
V de la victoire, drapeau du Hezbollah claquant au vent, en voiture ou en fourgonnette, des milliers de Libanais envahissent à l'heure actuelle les routes menant au sud du pays. Au fur et à mesure que l'armée israélienne se retire, les civils encadrés de miliciens du Hezbollah progressent. Pour la plupart de ces hommes et de ces femmes, cela faisait 22 ans qu'ils attendaient ce moment-là.
C'est l'époque dorée du Hezbollah. Ils ont captivé le cœur et l'esprit des masses arabes pendant un bon moment, malgré le fait qu'ils étaient chiites et que 90% de la population arabe est sunnite.
You have to look at Hezbollah, I mean, whoever side you are on, is Robin Hood. Look, if you're Lebanese and you're tired of being humiliated, who do you have? You've got Hezbollah, and that's it.
ختاوي صغار كبار كله كان يلا، حتى في مواقع يعني حزب الله قالوا لي يا عمي طولوا بالكم شوي انه حتى بس يفلوا. والله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. طبعا يعني الإسرائيل لما احتل جنوب لبنان نحن كنا أولاد صغار عمرنا 13 سنة، نجمع دواليب ونروح على مفرق الشرقية عندنا بالدوير بجنوب لبنان. يعني مجرد ما يوصل العدو الإسرائيلي لمطرح قبل يعني 20 متر نقوم بوضع الدواليب وتوليان. بأكثر المرات كانوا يلقطونا ياخذونا على المعتقل يضربونا كم كاف. 13 سنة ولد شو بدوا يعملوا ويزعبونا مشي، نعود تاني يوم نعيدها. هي ذاتها يعني. هذه أول العمليات. ولكن كأنشطة عسكرية هي بلشت ب86. كله تمام. اخبط بسكرها لها. يا هلا، سلام، كيفك حبيب القلب؟ الله يعطيك العافية يا رب. أنا انجرحت 17 أو 18 مرة. هيدي الجراح هي أوسمة.
أنا ناحي صادق.
يا الله، هذا حزب الله هو هيدا الحزب. ايه حزب الله ما بيترك، يعني الاخ بس يتصاب بالمعركه هو تلقائيا بدغري اوتوماتيكيا هو بالمستشفى بينقلوه دغري لوين؟ لعند مؤسسه الجرح. بدها تهتم بعياله وبدها تهتم بكل تفاصيله. يا زلمه خاف الله، خاف الله يا زلمه. ظهري لا طلع.
For Hezbollah, fighting, politics, social welfare provision, they are all about creating a culture of resistance, of muqawama.
الآن أصبحنا نملك قوة شعبية حقيقية، قوة شعبية تدخل إلى الطفل والشيخ والمرأة والشاب، يعني العائلة كلها حزب الله. نحن لسنا تنظيماً عادياً. سماحة السيد هو الرئيس الأعلى السياسي وهو الرئيس الأعلى الجهادي. عندنا لا يوجد فصل.
Hassan Nasrallah est un homme remarquable et redoutable. C'est un homme qui est un tribun hors du commun, qui a une langue arabe parfaite et donc qui peut s'adresser à tous les musulmans du monde.
أن نتبنى غيره كوننا مؤمنين عقائديين هو مشروع الدولة الإسلامية وحكم الإسلام.
Think of Nasrallah's Robespierre. Uncorruptible, trying to create a revolution, and has done the best he could.
بعرف سماحة السيد حسن، بعرفه معرفة شخصية وهو بيعرفني معرفة شخصية. فمرة حصلت معي نهفة أنا وياه، هي قبل 2000. أنا حطيت إيدي على كتفه لسماحة السيد عبطته، قلت له لا اتكل على الله صور. هيدا الخاتم من سماحة السيد، هيدا المصحف من سماحة السيد.
Pendant toute la période, je dirais, glorieuse du Hezbollah, on allait chez Nasrallah. Et je me souviens, on change de voiture. Puis vous sortez du garage dans une autre voiture. Vous ne savez pas très bien, on ne vous ferme pas les yeux, non. Mais vous ne savez pas très bien où vous êtes. Vous savez que vous êtes dans la banlieue sud. C'est qu'il y a un quadrilatère, ce qu'on appelle le Murabba, le quadrilatère du parti, c'est quelque part là-bas.
Why haven't the Israelis killed him with a drone? Because they can't find him. He knows about telephones, he knows about drones, he knows all this stuff. He knows how to stay alive. He's a survivor like Mugnia. Same mold.
Il est parfois très franc, parfois il affleure les sujets. Et là, vous devez savoir qu'il y a un peu ce qu'on appelle chez nous, dans les communautés musulmanes, je suis bien placé pour en parler, parce que les Druzes aussi la pratiquent, ce qu'on appelle la taqiyya. La taqiyya, ce n'est pas une duplicité, mais on affiche une sorte de bienséance, qui ne dit pas toujours toutes les vérités. On ne voyait pas encore en lui l'ogre qui allait dévorer le Liban plus tard.
In the early 2000s, nobody in the West noticed Hezbollah expanding its grip on Lebanon. At the time, the international community was focused on Iraq. The US had just invaded the country and was facing fierce resistance from local militias. Many of them were Shiite, armed and financed by Iran. What America didn't know at the time was that Lebanese fighters from Hezbollah had come to help their Iraqi brothers in the name of Shiite solidarity and the fight against their common enemy, the Great Satan.
It started with the war in Iraq and my involvement as an advisor to a U.S. Special Operations Command on the ground in Iraq against IEDs, which were called explosively formed projectiles, EFPs. This weapon, the way it was designed, had extraordinary ferocity and explosive impact.
Come here, man, check this out. I think I found something. Yeah. Those are like bombs. Look at that thing.
A very small tube with a copper plate would yield a huge explosion, enough to cut an M1A1 tank almost in half, which we've never seen anyone be able to do with any sort of a normal explosive. It was a signature weapon, so the fact that it was being used against American forces told me that Hezbollah had to be on the ground.
Hezbollah instructors train approximately 20 to 60 Iraqis at a time, sending them back to Iraq, organized into these special groups. They're being taught how to use EFPs, mortars, rockets, as well as intelligence, sniper, and kidnapping operations.
The explosively formed projectile that was being employed in Iraq against American forces was designed by Hezbollah. And the man behind the creation of this weapon was Imad Magnia.
So I started hearing about the President's Man. They called him the President's Man because he had worked directly for President Bush in the Bush White House.
I was focusing on the finances, and I was aware that a great deal of money involving the EFP networks in Iraq was being derived from cash houses in Lebanon. Something sort of remarkable happened. We started to see phone selectors that were tied to the financing of IED attacks in Iraq that were then apparently in touch with numbers in South America. I was like, are they really did they mean to call Colombia? I said, what does this mean? I mean, it's like, this is very bizarre. But this pattern kept happening. Why are these people in contact? What are they talking about? What are they doing? And I realized suddenly, are these guys turning to Colombian sources of narco financing to fund their operations on the ground in Iraq? I mean, I was just like, it just a light went on in my head because I was familiar with narcotics trafficking, global money laundering for organized crime. Drug money, at one level or another, was making its way, the profits were making their way into the war in Iraq. Wow, if we could track this money and we could tie it to drugs, and then we were to pursue the drug trafficking and start to take down the drug business, we could start to really put a financial hit around Hezbollah's ability to operate in Iraq. My orders were to attack this foggy situation and then to try to tie this into the leadership, and the leadership being Imad Mughniyeh. So I wanted to go after Imad Mughniyeh.
Hezbollah was developing this worldwide capability and generating billions of dollars, and we had to take action.
For them to turn to narcotics trafficking was the greatest gift we could ever be given. Suddenly we had a way of using lawfare, not warfare, to attack a terrorist organization's finances. And when I briefed it up the chain at U.S. Central Command to General Allen and through him to General Petraeus, they're like, hot shit, it's a great idea. What could we couldn't dream of something better than this, because like, we can't fight those guys.
Washington considered Hezbollah's involvement in the death of US soldiers in Iraq a declaration of war, and relaunched Operation Cassandra. The DEA had a free rein to attack the Party of God in the name of national security.
I wanted to go after their money. I wanted to go after their networks. I wanted to take down their finances. I wanted to go after their banks. They had criminalized themselves. We needed to reveal that to the world and to their own people.
كان صار لي 5 سنين بجهاز أمن الدولي، وهون توثقت علاقتي برفيق الحريري، وكان صار لي تقريبا عملت أول 4 سنين مع رفيق الحريري كان اسمها فرع المعلومات يومتها، إنشاء جهاز المعلومات. بهالفترة كان بنيت علاقة ثقة أنا ورفيق الحريري. يعني ب 24/12/2004 يعني اجاني مصدر معلومات انه بحملك رساله لرفيق الحريري خليه ينتبه كانه في جو اغتيال الحقيقه. وانا جيت لعنده قلت له دوله الرئيس لازم تنتبه. انا بالنهايه كان جوابه انه بالنهايه انا عندي ضمانات دوليه، عندي علاقات دوليه. بيجي مصدر ثاني بيأكد المعلومات الأولية، ويرجع تماما فورا أنا بتواجد عند رئيس الحريق رجاء ننتبه قد ما فيك عم يحضروا اغتيال الحقيقة، وإذا ظرفك بيسمح غادر البلد بهالمرحلة هي الحقيقة.
Sous la colonne de fumée, ce qu'il reste du cortège qui ramenait Rafik Hariri du Parlement. L'explosion a blessé une centaine de personnes et en a tué 9. Rafik Hariri a été extrait rapidement de la carcasse de sa voiture, mais son décès a été constaté à l'hôpital. Un cratère large d'une dizaine de mètres causé par l'explosion d'une voiture piégée d'au moins 350 kg d'explosifs. L'ancien Premier ministre avait peu de chance d'échapper à l'attentat.
sont des centaines de milliers. Ils convergent tous vers la place des Martyrs, au centre de Beyrouth. Les slogans sont en fait des insultes à la Syrie et à son président. En clair, la Syrie dehors.
Hariri was a threat to Syrian domination in Lebanon. Syria has been a close ally to Hezbollah. Rafik Hariri was pushing too hard on things that were going to undermine their position in Lebanon, and that was not to be allowed.
عماد مغنية شريك أكيد بالقرار لأنه بالنهاية كان هالقد والتنفيذ كان على عاتق مجموعاته تبع الاغتيالات.
Le Hezbollah a pris le pouvoir le jour de l'assassinat. Ils ont pris le terrain, le gouvernement, la présidence de la République, ils ont neutralisé l'armée. C'est à ce moment-là que se déclenche l'élimination physique au Liban de quiconque pouvait dire non au parti de Dieu de Hezbollah.
إذا أخذت ماركو بتحط راسك وبتنام وفرضه على جنبه وريقه وكل شيء نحن ما يكون، ما حدا بيقول له وين رايح.
We determined through our investigation that Hezbollah was operating like a global drug cartel. So we wanted to apply the same logic that was successful going after the Italian organized crime families, going after the cartels in Colombia.
Moi, j'étais une proie simple.
Qui a cherché à vous tuer?
Les Syriens, le Hezbollah.
Clearly, they thought they could operate with impunity in Lebanon.
I mean, the cartels are good, but Hezbollah is another whole level.
The assassination of Prime Minister Rafik Hariri sent a shockwave throughout Lebanon and the international community. All eyes were on Syria, which was accused of being behind the attack. Bashar al-Assad's army, which had partly occupied Lebanon for 30 years, had to withdraw, harangued by the people. With the Syrians' withdrawal, Hezbollah lost a long-term ally and protector. Worse still, Hezbollah found itself accused of being involved in Rafik Hariri's assassination. Undermined, it resumed its violent activities. First in Lebanon, in a campaign against its political opponents. Then, beyond its frontiers, by provoking its sworn enemy, Israel.
لدينا قناعة بأن الأسرى في الكيان الإسرائيلي لا يمكن أن يخرجوا إلا بتبادل الأسرى. يعني يجب أن يكون لدينا أسرى إسرائيليين حتى نتمكن من إخراج الأسرى اللبنانيين موجودين في السجون الإسرائيلية.
militaires viennent d'être capturés au Liban par le Hezbollah.
2 militaires ont été capturés par le Hezbollah.
On ne connaît pas encore les circonstances exactes de l'enlèvement de 2 soldats israéliens par le Hezbollah, mais l'événement est considéré comme gravissime en Israël.
وطبعا كنا نتوقع أن يحصل حرب لكن بنسبة قليلة جدا 5% 10%. يعني لم نكن نتوقع أن تحصل حرب بهذه الضخامة.
Massés le long de la frontière israélo-libanaise, toute la journée, les chars ont bombardé la région. Les hélicoptères aussi. Les forces israéliennes sont entrées au sud Liban.
ממשלת לבנון, שהחיזבאללה הוא חלק ממנה, מנסה לערער את היציבות האזורית. לבנון היא האחראית.
إذا الإسرائيلي بده يفكر بأي عمل عسكري إذا كان هدفه استعادة الأسيرين فهو واهم 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 حتى ينقطع النفس.
وأنا هون خليني شك تماماً إنه قد يكون أحد أسباب حرب تموز هو نحن مواجهتنا لحسن نصر الله ولحزب الله بالوقائع اللي بتقول إنه حزب الله قاتل رفيق الحريري. هو بلش، هو خطف يومتها جنديين إسرائيليين لفجر الوضع مبدئيا.
We stayed the first days, and Hezbollah was coming, you have to leave, you have to leave. So I believe profoundly that Hezbollah expected what would happen later. They expected these extremely heavy bombardments. Since 20 years, I'm living here in the southern suburbs of Beirut, which are called the Dahir. So we are really in a kind of ghetto here, controlled by Hezbollah. During the war, there was a group of Hezbollah fighters sitting in our garden discussing, in other words, having a kind of meeting. And I was panicking because I thought if the drones will capture Hezbollah sitting in our garden, they will bombard the whole house. And as there was this kind of tension, I made a very bad joke. I don't know what took me, but I just said, you would like to have a picture of you? And somebody answers me, if you take one, the Americans would pay you $1 million. So, I said, sorry, it was a bad joke. I will go up to the apartment, I need some clothes, and I will leave. So I left, and 2 years later, the Hezbollah commander, Imad Mournier, is assassinated. And all of a sudden, there's this huge 3-meter-long posters everywhere in the street of Imad Mournier. And I'm telling myself, I have seen him. And at one point, it just made this click, and I realized The guy who told me the Americans would have paid you $1 million was Imad Monir.
After 33 days of Israeli bombings, Hezbollah obtained a ceasefire without releasing the 2 hostages. In Beirut, Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, celebrated the victory of the resistance over the historical enemy. Hassan Nasrallah strengthened his hero status throughout the Arab world. He was the first to humiliate Israel, the little Satan. Money was needed to finance Lebanon's reconstruction. This was the moment the DEA had been waiting for. Its agents in Washington were monitoring all the movements of funds arriving in Beirut. In the funds coming from around the world, they searched for drug money.
In 2006, Israeli Air Force destroyed every major bridge in Lebanon. They destroyed many of the road systems. Airport was impacted. The place was chaos. Lebanon was in deep trouble financially. Normally, somebody bombs a country, their credit rating goes down, money doesn't flood into their country, okay? I'm a finance guy. This is not how things normally work. But in Lebanon, miracles happen. They need the money, and lo and behold, what happens? This amazing amount of money was rushing into Lebanon.
I remember well, the war ended at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning. Hezbollah was present everywhere. People were able to go somewhere to complain that they had lost their house. A member of the family was killed. Thousands of families had lost everything. Hezbollah was offering compensation. People were receiving around $10,000. The money was, of course, coming from Iran.
نحن نتلقى مساعدات من إيران، وهذا أمر معلن وواضح. لكن حزب الله أيضا لديه موارد من أموال الخمس التي يدفعها المؤمنون. المؤمن بحسب الوضع الشيعي يجب أن يدفع كل سنة من أرباحه التي تبقى لديه 20% يدفعها لعالم الدين من أجل صرفها على قضايا المسلمين وعلى الفقراء وعلى كل هذه الأمور.
Hezbollah makes plenty of money through business activity. It makes money through donations. But at the end of the day, they're reliant on Iran for their big bucks.
And how much money, more or less, does it represent?
Hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year in cash.
عادة نحن لا نتكلم عن أرقام الموازنة ولا عن أعداد السلاح ولا عن أعداد الأفراد. هذه من أسرار الحزب.
In 2007, the Lebanese banking system began to explode in growth. We realized, and what I realized as I started to look into it, a huge amount of that money was drug money. But the key thing is who organized this scheme? Well, ultimately, Imad Mughniyeh himself.
Hezbollah leaders have made public statements that the drug industry is forbidden. Sometimes the bad guys lie, and they look the other way.
The U.S. Treasury Department is the finance ministry of the United States. And we knew we had power, we knew we had tools, we knew we had authorities to reach into Beirut, to reach into the Lebanese financial system, and put our finger on the scale a little bit and say, okay, now we're going to start impacting your ability to feel comfortable where you thought you were the safest.
The US government went on the offensive. The agents of the DEA received the order to infiltrate the illicit financial circuits woven by Imad Mughniyeh, the Party of God's military strategist. Wiretaps allowed them to identify international money laundering circuits and the organization of Hezbollah's hidden networks that dealt with the South American drug cartels.
So the team identifying the network, we identified what we called the super facilitators, like the biggest members of the organization. Like in an organized crime family, these were the bosses, right? Or in a cartel, we call them cell heads, right? With Hezbollah, it was the super facilitators.
Pretty quickly, we identified a Latin American drug lord tied to Medellin, but operating in Lebanon and looked like Hezbollah strongholds in Lebanon. A Lebanese male called Ayman Juma. Ayman Juma was far, far above a guy like Chekri Harb because he's a very powerful man.
He's the bridge between the Colombian cartel's money and Hezbollah's. I mean, he was like the only guy who was a Sunni who was living in the hardest core Shia area of southern Beirut, you know, in a beautiful apartment, I believe, on the beach, guarded by Hezbollah guards and things. Very unusual.
So our entire focus was on Ayman Juma and how we can possibly infiltrate his network right in Lebanon. Ayman Juma wanted to meet with us. Sometimes our top international targets, they get wind of the indictment, or we let them know, sort of in a quiet way, hey, you know, you're indicted. And what often happens is through a lawyer they have, or maybe even directly, it could start with a direct conversation, is that the bad guy wanted to see if he could work out some sort of deal. It was under the guise that Ayman Juma was going to cooperate with the Drug Enforcement Administration, which I was never going to let that happen if I could. In my mind, this is the guy that we need to put in jail, not to cooperate. So we set up a meeting. It was actually at the Trump Tower in Panama City. The agents and the prosecutors and the lawyer were all wearing really nice clothes, and I decided to just go in my shorts and a T-shirt into the Trump Tower. And I was the only guy wearing shorts and a T-shirt, but I think I was doing it on purpose because I didn't want to give Juma any idea that I thought like I'm doing anything special for the guy. From my 20 years of experience working with criminals and mafiosos, that he appeared to me to be a hardcore mafia member. So anytime we caught each other's glance, he had this look of, if I get the chance, I'm gonna kill you. He's a mob boss, no doubt. I stayed real quiet through most of the meeting, and then finally I said, you haven't given us shit. There's absolutely nothing that you've given us that we don't already know. So we went our separate ways. It does appear that both inside and outside the Trump Tower, they were surreptitiously taking pictures of us. It was basically certain that Hezbollah had launched an intelligence investigation on Asher and myself, basically the Cassandra task force. They tried to contract other criminal groups, including cartels. So they would pay if these people would kill us.
Are you scared?
No, definitely not scared. No, I mean, I took it as, you took it as a compliment. And then you also felt like, wow, we must really be doing our job because they're so pissed off at us, they're so angry. You'd have to ask Dave Asher if he was scared. I don't know. I wasn't scared, but who knows?
When I started Project Cassandra with my partner Jack Kelly and our fearless leader Derek Maltz, they knew I had another job, but I don't think they quite realized where I worked. You know, I worked at 375 Park Avenue in New York on the 33rd floor for a $2 billion hedge fund where I was a partner. This is my side project. You know, so half the day I'm managing billions of dollars in loans and equity investments. And the rest of the day, I'm hanging out with guys like Jack Kelly and others inside the Syntac, which was like, I'd fly from New York on a plane, right into Dulles, and I'd like be dressed like this. I'd be, business suit. These guys were wearing blue jeans and, like T-shirts and shit, and, acting like a bunch of baboons. And I'm like, hey, I just met with, George Soros.
The DEA finally decided to charge Ayman Juma with drug trafficking and money laundering. But he had already fled. Operation Cassandra was stepped up. 100 agents were now working to find Ayman Juma's accomplices. The investigation focused on Venezuela, a South American country hostile to the US. Its president, Hugo Chavez, opened its frontiers to the historical foes of the Great Satan. First and foremost, the Islamic Republic of Iran and its protege, Hezbollah.
I come from a family that believes in government service and serving society, and it was a path to maybe try to do a little bit of good in the world. We were out of DEA's Special Operations Division, and we were called the Bilateral Investigative Unit. So originally we were focused on kingpins, kind of the untouchables in the world, but we quickly started to really see a big nexus between a lot of these groups involved in terrorism and how they're being financed through the narcotics trade. Derek Maltz was our special agent in charge for most of my tour there. Derek's the best.
And we started realizing how Hezbollah was moving operations into Venezuela in an opportunity to generate, millions and millions of dollars to help them fund their operations. It was very apparent after the war in 2006 with Israel, Ayman Juma and the network of Hezbollah operatives were very closely aligned with the corrupt military and corrupt government officials at the highest level of Venezuelan government.
What happened was the majority of Colombian cocaine entering the United States and Europe comes out of Venezuela. It's not Venezuelan cocaine, but Venezuela is the gateway. And through our penetrations in Venezuela, we also started to learn a lot about Hezbollah.
We did learn through our investigations that a Venezuelan official went over to a meeting in Damascus, Syria, and was offered the assistance of Hezbollah. There has been reporting that it was Nasrallah at the meeting. I think it was much more likely that it was Igmad Mugnia, the head of military operations for Hezbollah. Clearly, both were very contrary to the national security policies of the United States. They believe they shared a common enemy, and Hezbollah is certainly offering their expertise in resistance in creating militia systems. Some of the other, I think, interesting connections that came out were, for example, there's an airline out of Venezuela called Conviasa. Some have called it Aero Terror. And we started to learn there's a weekly flight to Tehran. Very often it's stopped over in Damascus.
Planes loaded with weapons, you know, RPGs, surface-to-air missiles, AK rifles, into Venezuela from these flights. And also they were picking up large sums of cash, you know, cocaine, bringing that stuff back into the Middle East.
You get 7 to 10 tons coming out of Venezuela a week, okay? 7 to 10 tons is a lot of coke. This partnership, this narco-terrorist partnership is emerging between the government of Venezuela under Hugo Chavez and the Iranians and Hezbollah.
Le damos la bienvenida a un insigne líder como usted, líder de un pueblo heroico, el pueblo iraní, y líder de una revolución, hermana de la revolución venezolana, la revolución islámica. Hoy Venezuela está de júbilo. Bienvenido, hermano. Salam aleikum.
Drugs became part of the resistance. Narco resistance. Trafficking the dope erodes the infidels, it hurts their youth, spoils their power.
We started to see some really higher level Venezuelan officials, persons like Tarek El-Assami, who's the former Minister of Interior and I believe the former Vice President. He's of Lebanese Syrian descent, ties back to that part of the world. Tarek is one of those really powerful officials who has so much influence in a country that he allows the system to operate. He allows the drug traffickers to be protected. He allows flights to leave without people doing their job and inspecting it. He allows travel documents to be issued for persons in other countries that otherwise might not be eligible for receiving those travel documents. He allows massive amounts of monies to be laundered through formal financial institutions.
Yesterday, the Department of Treasury's Office of Foreign Asset Control, known as OFAC, designated Venezuelan national Tarek El-Assami as a specially designated narcotics trafficker pursuant for playing a significant role in international narcotics trafficking.
Hezbollah wanted to get closer and closer to being involved in the distribution and laundering. So they became sort of an end-to-end element in the drug trafficking. You know, Not something you normally see a terrorist organization do. When it came to the drug business, these guys were eager to make a buck and very aggressive, and not necessarily that careful.
ولطالما سعوا للنيل منه خلال أكثر من 20 عاماً إلى أن اختاره الله تعالى شهيداً على يد قتلة أنبيائه والمفسدين في أرضه الذين يعرفون.
US and Israeli teams put together a very, very small explosive. Ultimately, one night coming out of Syrian military intelligence, Imad Mughniya got into his vehicle and the explosive was detonated, killing him instantly.
رحمه الله.
The man whose existence was denied during life, but in death embraced. He and only he held this mystique. The removal of Imad Mughniya, I think, was a very significant takedown for the organization.
With Imad Mughniya's death, Hezbollah didn't just lose a military legend. It lost the man who controlled the organization's illicit finances. This weakened its power within Lebanon. But the party of God is most dangerous when threatened. Hassan Nasrallah took the ultimate risk, a coup to tighten his grip on the country.
Ce jour-là, Beyrouth se vide totalement. L'armée libanaise disparaît comme par enchantement. Et le chef d'état-major, qui était un ami, m'a dit « Sors de chez toi, utilise une voiture blindée, ne t'arrête à aucun barrage. Fonce à travers les barrages et si on tire sur toi, riposte, que tes gens ripostent. » Je suis ministre en fonction. Ce jour-là, les milices du Hezbollah, en blouse noire, ils investissent la capitale. Exactement comme la marche de Mussolini sur Rome.
بالنهاية بعد حرب تموز نزل يعني كشف قناعه مش مدافع عن لبنان بوش الإيراني بوش الإسرائيل إنما بالنهاية بده يحط إيده كاملة على لبنان. هو كان عم يعمل قضم للدولة شوي تدريجيا بكل أسف وعم ياكلها لقمة ورا لقمة الحقيقة.
Ce grignotage permanent du pouvoir est en train, à ce moment-là, de nous faire avancer vers ce qui sera plus tard et l'est désormais maintenant un pouvoir absolu de Hassan Nasrallah sur le Liban.
ما حصل في 7 أيام وضع حداً سريعاً لمؤامرة كبرى كانت تحضر لهذه المقاومة. طيب أنا أقول لكم كان مشروعهم في السنوات الماضية العمل على إيجاد صراع وقتال بين الجيش والمقاومة وفشلوا.
Il y a un décideur, c'est Hassan Nasrallah, mais à travers lui, le grand décideur, c'est Téhéran.
إذا أنا بشوفها كانت محاولة انقلاب أو وضع يد كاملة على كل لبنان تنفيذا للأجندة تبعته أو الاستراتيجية تبعته إنه تحويل لبنان إلى ولاية إيرانية.
They have been building up over the years a parallel system. So you can go here to a supermarket controlled by Hezbollah where you find Iranian products. There are hospitals under the control of Hezbollah. There are banks under the control of Hezbollah. I mean, Iran has a long-term strategy.
يعني اليوم استراتيجيتهم هي كان في وهم تاريخي انه نعيد انشاء الامبراطوريه الفارسيه القديمه اللي وصلت لشواطئ البحر المتوسط سابقا.
Thanks to Iran's unfailing support, Hezbollah has considerable control over Lebanese political, economic, and judicial life. But in its impossible investigation, the DEA had a significant advantage. It had unlimited means. By tracing Hezbollah's narco dollars, the DEA reached the Shiite empire's outpost, Africa, which is home to a large Lebanese community.
So during Project Cassandra, we actually identified probably one of the biggest trade-based money laundering schemes that I'm aware of to support terrorist organization like Hezbollah. West Africa was a hub for global cocaine trafficking around the world. And so we started putting a lot of resources into West Africa. We had aerial photos in 2006, and the land was completely vacant along the coastline.
There's just these big stretches of beach. And then in 2007, you start to see these used car lots start emerging. By 2008, they're full of cars, like 30, 40,000 cars a week are going through these car lots.
We didn't really understand it. I mean, nothing wrong with importing cars and doing, international car business. It's a legal business.
Who owned those car lots? Well, quite a few of them were owned by Lebanese who were supporters of Hezbollah.
Ali Karoubi was living in Benin. He was one of the main guys that established working with Aman Juma and all of these guys that were establishing Hezbollah's operations in Africa.
They would take the drug money, buy used cars, send those used cars to West Africa, sell the used cars, then send the money, the clean money, back to Lebanon. And then it would go make its way back to South America to buy more cocaine, and this thing would continue.
And the beauty of it is there were legitimate business owners that were making money. People in West Africa were getting cars, so they were happy, right? And Hezbollah, under the radar, was getting their cut of the profits to develop the cash flow that they needed to carry out their global agenda.
أما تبييض الأموال، أي تبييض أموال، نحن ما عندنا حسابات لا في البنوك ولا لدينا شركات تجارية. هناك أفراد لديهم تجارات، لديهم مصالح، لكن هم شيعة. يمكن يكون بعض الأفراد عنده أعمال مخالفة للقانون أو ما شابه، شو لنا علاقة نحن بالموضوع؟
We estimated about $200 million a month was being generated from this scheme. That's over, do the math, right? 200 billion times 12, right? That's $2.4 billion annually.
Figuring that out was enough of a challenge, let me tell you. It was complicated. And, you know, the money moves back to buy more narcotics, and this thing keeps repeating. Except, you know, as it repeats, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's when we started to see our opportunity to try to choke it.
Hezbollah had a plan in place, and then that was, let's take over a bank. And the easiest way to do that was in Lebanon.
By 2009, 2010, when we started to look at the Lebanese-Canadian bank seriously, we wanted to figure out what this bank was doing, and then I wanted to penetrate the bank and get inside it. And we were Colombian drug traffickers. Not me, my guys. And money launderers. And what was the relationship between Lebanese-Canadian Bank and Hezbollah? We later learned that, in effect, Hezbollah had about a 28% ownership of Lebanese-Canadian Bank.
For us, it was the smoking gun because it backed up all the analysis and the other evidence we had been gathering.
نحن بعدنا على الدقة القديمة ننقل الأموال بالمحافظ يعني لكن لأنه في سيارات لا ننقلها على الدابة وإلا لو ما في سيارات كنا نقلناها على الحمير والأحصنة.
You know, they take hundreds of millions of dollars in cash, they literally bring it on in on pallets, dump it in the bank, and suddenly it's inside the Lebanese banking system.
How much?
Billions. Billions of dollars a year.
Hezbollah accounts through credits and debits moved $5 billion in 18 months, just through Lebanese Canadian bank accounts. That shows you the significant amount of money.
And I wanted to target that bank. And then I wanted to bankrupt that bank. And that's exactly what we did.
Section 311 is often described as the atomic bomb of Treasury authorities. So the practical result means that you lose, as a matter of law, your access to the US financial system, in this case, Lebanese Canadian Bank. It becomes much, much more difficult to engage in any dollar transactions. Informally, you'll probably lose almost all of your financial relationships anywhere in the world.
I like to think of it as a big bowl of yarn. And as you pulled the string of yarn, more and more and more cases came out. Authorities are still, today, pulling at the strings of the Lebanese Canadian Bank and finding cases from North America to Africa and Europe and across the Middle East. It was a tremendously insightful window into a very, very broad range of Hezbollah activities.
The dismantling of the Lebanese Canadian Bank was a precious victory for the DEA in its global war on the financing of Hezbollah. The vice was tightening on the Shiite Islamist organization. After several years of obstruction, the inquiry into Rafi Hariri's assassination was reopened. The UN established the Special Tribunal for Lebanon. For the first time, the divine impunity of the Party of God was publicly questioned.
The creation of the Special Tribunal for Lebanon is the result of a tragedy. The killing of a former prime minister and of 22 other persons. The STL is the first international anti-terrorist tribunal. The creation of the tribunal was a political decision. Its operation, however, is and must remain above politics.
The Special Tribunal for Lebanon is now in session. L'audience du tribunal spécial pour le Liban est ouverte. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
En 2010, je rejoins le tribunal spécial pour le Liban, donc le TSL comme on l'appelle, et sa fonction, c'est d'enquêter non seulement sur l'assassinat de Rafik Hariri, mais également sur un ensemble de crimes connexes. Une enquête délicate parce qu'on travaille à l'étranger, dans un contexte difficile, de tension évidemment. On se déplaçait avec des véhicules protégés, il y avait de multiples contrôles, des checkpoints, on habitait dans des endroits spécifiquement gardés. On s'entoure de 1000 précautions parce que les enquêteurs étaient quand même visés. Il y a eu une enquête libanaise également, qui est venue nourrir énormément l'enquête du tribunal spécial pour le Liban, et en particulier les investigations qui avaient été menées par un jeune officier de police libanais, Wissam Eid, qui l'a payé de sa vie.
بهالوقت هذا كان وسام عيد عم يطلع على منطقة وجود المحقق الدولي، يشرح لهم من وقت لوقت كل التفاصيل والأدلة اللي عملها مبدئيا. بإحدى الزيارات هو رجع منها بكل أسف، فجروا له موكبه وقتلوه الحقيقة.
حزب الله ما بدها اثنين يحكوا فيها. يعني ثاني مرة عطوه انذار، قولوا له إلا وسام الله يرحمه إنه كيف بلاك عنا حزب الله.
ما في جريمة كاملة، دائما في فجوة نمسك الحقيقة بالتحقيق. أنت بدك طرف خيط صغير تمام الحقيقة.
Nearly 6 years on, and the assassination of former Lebanese Prime Minister Rafik Hariri remains officially unsolved. It is not for lack of evidence, evidence which points directly and indirectly to Hezbollah.
داتا الاتصالات عطتنا إشارات انه حزب الله هي مجموعه الارجح من حزب الله الحقيقه، لانه كان في مجموعه من الارقام ما بتحكي الا مع بعض البعض، حوالي 8 ارقام فقط لا غير، ما بيحكوا مع حدا ثاني للامانه. وهي الارقام شفناها انه كانت دائما وراء رفيق الحريري. ويوم الجريمة كانوا حول مسرح الجريمة.
نحن نعتبر أن كل الأدلة هي أدلة ظرفية مبنية على الاتصالات وعلى قاعدة الاحتمالات غير الموثوقة، وفي آن معا هناك لعب بشبكة الاتصالات بطريقة غير عادية. وحزب الله لا علاقة له بالتفجير والاغتيال.
I've seen the evidence, and it's very good. It was Hezbollah who killed Hariri. You cannot fake this evidence. And if any Lebanese say, oh, they made this shit up, the CIA did, they're stupid. They're liars, stupider liars.
The indictment charges each of the four accused, that's Mr. Salim Jamil Ayash, Mr. Mustafa Amin Badruddin, Mr. Hussein Hassan Onisi and Mr. Assad Hassan Sabra with 4 crimes contrary to Lebanese law. We then decided to proceed to trial in absentia.
يخطئ من يتصور هذا المستعجل بده يطلع القواوي الظني يخطئ من يتصور أننا سنسمح بتوقيف أو اعتقال أحد من مجاهدينا وأن اليد التي ستمتد إلى أي واحد منهم ستقطع.
It was a warning to the Lebanese state and journalists, don't come after us for Hariri, because we'll kill you. I tell you, you go to Nasrallah's office, knock on the door and say, I want to do a film about his killing Hariri, and you probably not come out of Lebanon alive. They don't joke around with this.
Tout ce qui est justice internationale, loi internationale, mandat d'arrêt internationaux, tout ceci n'a aucune valeur chez eux.
"15 years after Rafik Hariri's assassination, the SDL delivered its verdict. 3 members of Hezbollah received life sentences. They've never been arrested. The 4th defendant, a top-ranking Hezbollah member, is presumed dead. Impunity continues, whilst its clandestine financing networks are recreated on other continents.
They were looking for places where they could operate. Europe is important for Hezbollah for lots of reasons. It is a place where Hezbollah can raise a lot of money. It is a place where it can carry out operations. It is close to Lebanon.
France appears in some ways to be their command and control center for their activities in the rest of Europe.
Cela fait 100 jours que le peuple syrien proteste contre le régime du président Bachar al-Assad. Et la contestation ne faiblit pas, la répression non plus. Selon les ONG, plus de 1300 personnes auraient été tuées depuis le 15 mars, date du début du mouvement.
Il y avait panique à Damas. Bachar al-Assad n'osait plus sortir de chez lui. Toute la ville était encerclée par sa propre banlieue, par le sud du pays, par le nord du pays. Et donc, il y a eu ordre donné à Hassan Nasrallah d'intervenir.
نحن حلفاء لسوريا. حزب الله حليف لسوريا. إيران حليفة لسوريا. لكن طبعا عندما يأخذ الإمام الخامنئي القرار هذا يشعرنا اطمئنان أن عملنا عمل شرعي.
Nasrallah at first isn't so happy about it, but when the message comes from the office of the Supreme Leader, that's the end of the conversation. And they go.
هيدي البارودة كانت معنا بسوريا. كنا قوة خاصة يعني. ابني فرفور. وحكيت له وطلع على القوة الخاصة.
قوات الجيش السوري قوات حزب الله تتقدم.
حياتي كبير. تحياتنا.
بإذن الله كلكم شهداء.
إذا بلش ب 3000 بعدين 3000 صاروا 5 والخمسة صاروا 6.
هي أمير بعد ما صارت في ولا شهيد بعد.
It's completely a new Hezbollah because it's a regular army with surface-to-air missiles and units. They become a real military.
Project Cassandra identified a component known as the business affairs component. Their primary role was to establish the drug trafficking operations to generate the revenue. They had the conflict in Syria, so they had to have the money.
Ruim 8 ton cocaïne, €0,5 miljard straatwaarde.
We had a really successful 2014 against the Hezbollah, culminating over a course of 3 weeks of a season over 8 tons of cocaine out of the port in Rotterdam.
Suddenly, Hezbollah is not resisting Israel, it's just butchering fellow Muslims. Suddenly, it's involved in a deeply sectarian conflict.
These people are like the mafia, like the guys who sit around the table with Tony Soprano.
As of 2010, France became the favored asylum of Hezbollah operatives. It provided several advantages: a large Lebanese community that reduced their visibility, and freedom of movement throughout Europe. Paris was chosen as the beachhead to launder drug money. The US Drug Enforcement Administration alerted the French police. Together, they opened a new chapter in Operation Cassandra, known as Operation Cedar, after the national symbol of Lebanon.
Operation Cedar was a spin-off investigation under the umbrella of Project Cassandra. Operation Cedar focused on the European network.
The leaders of now our operations in Europe is really Captain Mugg and his team.
Le chef de poste de la DEA à Paris me contacte en me disant voilà, il y a en Europe tout un réseau de Libanais dont on sait qu'ils sont très actifs dans la collecte de l'argent de la drogue, le blanchiment, les transferts de fonds, etc. Ils ont subi de lourdes pertes financières et ils envisageraient peut-être de se relocaliser en France. Ce qui est un peu vexant pour nous, considérant que la France serait plus sûre. Bon. Ces enquêteurs américains me communiquent en fait un simple numéro de téléphone en me disant voilà, c'est le numéro du coursier qui va venir collecter l'argent. Très bien, bon.
So really, I think within 24 hours, they identified that phone as belonging to Mohammed Nur al-Din.
Mohamed Noureddin, c'est quand même quelqu'un dont les locaux professionnels sont installés à la bourse de Beyrouth, dans les locaux de la bourse de Beyrouth. C'est pas quelqu'un qui se cache, hein. Certaines statures. Le numéro de téléphone, c'est l'élément concret qui va nous permettre de débuter l'enquête. On va le mettre sur écoute, tout simplement. On a des centaines et des centaines d'heures d'écoute et de retranscription. Il n'est question que d'argent. On s'aperçoit qu'effectivement, il est en train de planifier une opération de collecte à Paris. On est sur 1 million d'euros par semaine, quand même. Bon. Les collectes sont extrêmement rapides. Les gens s'entrevoient, hein. Ils récupèrent un sac, ils partent, ils ne comptent même pas. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a une confiance là. Hein. Tu vas aller récupérer 450 000 euros. Bon, il y a des noms de code. Hein. Alors, j'ai une Mercedes 500 à tel endroit, bon, il y a 500 000 euros. Ou alors un camion. Alors, un camion, c'est 1 million. Bon, voilà. Le collecteur se déplace et il va aller dans un parking souterrain, dans un restaurant, fréquemment dans la rue même. Hein. Lorsque nous-mêmes nous avons participé à tout ça, ça s'est passé tout simplement sur les Champs-Élysées. Une voiture s'est garée, s'est postée à la hauteur de notre agent, l'échange a eu lieu et puis voilà. Il y avait aussi tout un commerce de montres. Il y avait un des hommes de Noureddin qui se chargeait d'aller acheter des montres en espèces. Il en a quand même acheté pour plus de 30 millions d'euros en un an. Hein. Il s'agissait de montres de très grand luxe. Bon, Rolex évidemment, Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet. On a vu notamment une montre Patek Philippe qui a été acquise pour 700 000 euros en liquide. Hein. Et donc toutes ces montres étaient ensuite transportées physiquement jusqu'au Liban. Et là encore, avec des sociétés d'import-export, enfin tout ça, prenait des apparences un peu légales.
He was a guy who was trusted to move very large amounts of money and oversee couriers who were carrying back money, sometimes just in Samsonites on, planes flying out of Charles de Gaulle back to Beirut. Air France, literally. These guys carry these Samsonites with millions of dollars, a couple $1 million in each Samsonite.
In cash?
Cash, it wasn't always like that, but sometimes it was that ridiculous. He was a super facilitator for drug money, make its way from Europe back to Lebanon, no doubt.
Ce que je vois sur mon territoire, moi, là, dans l'immédiat, c'est pas vraiment l'empreinte du Hezbollah. On n'a pas affaire à des gens très pieux. Non, on les retrouve essentiellement dans le triangle d'or parisien, plus enclin à aller boire des whisky hors d'âge au bar du Plaza Athénée qu'à fréquenter des mosquées. Voilà ce que je vois.
France appears in some ways to be their command and control center for their activities in the rest of Europe.
While the French police traced Mohamed Noureddin's network, Operation Cassandra's American agents tracked the laundered money in Lebanon. It led them to Eastern Europe in the footsteps of arms traffickers. The former socialist republics were full of armaments inherited from the Soviet Union. And among the gun dealers, the DEA targeted the key man in the traffic, a Lebanese citizen who had opened doors in Ukraine and Russia.
The agents call me up and they go, "Hey, have you ever heard of this Ali Fayed guy?" And I go, "Have I ever heard of Ali Fayed? Yeah, the guy's really significant. He's moving weapons for Iran and Hezbollah into the Middle East."
Ali Fayed was a well-known, well-documented arms dealer who was working with Russians and Ukrainian arms dealers to provide Hezbollah weapons, right? And these guys, you know, they were going to provide, you know, RPGs, AK rifles, surface-to-air missiles. They had access to the most sophisticated weapon systems in the world.
Once you get the charges against a guy like Fayed, you have to figure out what country can we arrest him. And that country also has to have an extradition treaty with the United States. And we identified Prague in the Czech Republic.
We infiltrated the network with our informants who portrayed themselves as members of the FARC in Colombia that needed weapons to kill Americans. And of course, Ali Fayed and his conspirators were looking to get cocaine also. So we had a cocaine for weapons deal.
So the operational plan was to do the arrests as he exited the room in the hallway of the hotel. So the room was wired up for video and audio. And then at one point, one of the sources says, you know, we want anti-aircraft missiles to kill Americans in Colombia. And then after we kill these Americans, I'll cut off one of the Americans' heads and I will present it to you, Ali Fayed, as a present. And Ali Fayed jumped up from the couch and went over and hugged the undercover.
Ali Fayad je jedním z trojice cizinců, které česká policie zadržela v dubnu 2014 v jednom z pražských hotelů. Spojené státy je podezírají, že chtěli prodat zbraně a drogy kolumbijským teroristům. Ali Fayad podle svého právníka sám pracuje pro libanonskou tajnou službu.
If we get this guy to the States, then he's going to be maybe our main witness to take out Hezbollah's drug cartel. There's only one thing that could get in the way of his extradition, is if Czech military intelligence gets involved. Military intelligence is very much under the influence still of Russia and Putin. And that could cause a major problem in the extradition of Fayed.
The arrest of Ali Fayed was the biggest success of the American anti-drug agency. The arms dealer knew all the secrets of the war in Syria. He was at the heart of the military alliance concluded between Hezbollah, Iran, and Russia to save Bashar al-Assad. But the DEA was stepping into a minefield. The criminal networks of the Party of God were protected by Moscow. The longer the war lasted, the more indispensable Hezbollah fighters became, and the more their need for weapons increased. The price to pay for this headlong rush was counted in the number of coffins that returned to Lebanon.
When the first Hezbollah fighters were killed, a cemetery opened for the so-called martyrs who were falling in Syria.
لأنه بني راح عنده مثل ما حكينا حوالي 3000 قتيل، وبس يكون عندك 3000 قتيل بحرب معينة، يعني عندك ضعفين جرح إصابات، يعني عندك 6000 إصابة، عمليا عندنا 10000، يعني تقريبا ما بين قتيل وبين مصاب. في 10000 عائلة أو 8000 عائلة تضرروا، يعني ضعف كتير، يعني راح منهم عدد كبير جدا.
عم تقشع؟
طبعا.
ماما 4 شنطة ما
عم نصلي بعد طب فوتوا البلد.
لازم
نصلي قبل هذيك
لا 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 خلص
قصة كبيرة مبين هون.
هون يلا يا خالتي روحي انت هونيك على الطاولة الصغيرة.
الله يأجركم على هيدا التعب.
أنا
عن جد مقدور. يعني أنا أول شيء جاني 3 بنات. أنا شخصيتي بحب البنات كتير، بس بنفس الوقت بحب بيجيني صبي أو صبيان لحتى يكونوا هك إنه افرح فيهم، يكونوا بهيدي الميادين، ميادين الجهاد.
طبعا كنا هلا
كرمال نحيا.
مجرد ما بعت الصورة يعني حسيت انه انا ما عادش بدي راح اشوف محمد. حسيت حالي انه انا بدي اشوف صورة محمد بس. بس قلت له يا بي انت قلت لي بدك تستشهد، بس يا بي مش بهالسرعة. يعني كنت حابب اني هيك القي عليه شوي صغيرة بس. يعني عادة الجريح قلت له طلعت اشطر من بيك يا بي. قلت له طلعت اشطر مني.
A part of the mothers who were crying over their sons, I mean, I'm sure they were convinced, but I also believe that others must have doubts. How far indoctrination can go, but from history we also know it can go very far.
القادم من مقام الحوراء زينب هنيئا لك الشهادة لبيك يا زينب لبيك يا زينب لبيك يا زينب لبيك يا زينب لبيك يا حسين.
يوم تشييع محمد صادق أنا بالنسبة لي كان يوم عرس. مش أنا ما كنت زعلان. يمكن أنا هلأ بحزق شوي بس قبل ما حزق بالمرة. أبداً 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 أبداً.
Hezbollah should know that Iran will fight to the last Hezbollah member. You know, look what happened in Syria. All the Hezbollah members died. How many Iranians died? Not many. What did they get in return? Not much. They come back to their bankrupt economy, bankrupt banking system. Their ports explodes. I mean, it's like Dante's gates of hell, you know. But we could go further down the cycle. You know, there's more gates that we can approach here in the future.
The war in Syria was profoundly changing the image of Hezbollah among many Lebanese. Yesterday considered as heroes, the fighters lost their aura of resistance fighters and were perceived as an army of mercenaries. Party leaders also changed. In their telephone tapping, the French and American investigators heard only about drugs, weapons, and money, just like in the mafia.
Mohamed Noureddin projette de venir en France. Et donc on met tout en place. On était parfaitement prêts à le recevoir. Et là, il se fait arrêter à l'aéroport. Et puis, dans le même temps, on interpelle différents membres de son équipe dans des hôtels de luxe à Paris, chez eux en Allemagne, en Italie, etc. Ah ben, il nie tout en bloc. Hein. Il explique que non, il n'a pas organisé de collecte, il n'est pas à la tête d'un réseau de blanchiment, etc. Bon. Et puis, il finit par reconnaître à minima les choses qui sont absolument irréfutables, tout en minimisant constamment son rôle.
We found out that the cocaine proceeds that Nur al-Din was coordinating at that time was the main funding mechanism to provide financial support to Hezbollah's purchase of arms out of Eastern Europe and Russia to send to Syria, basically.
After 8 years of investigations, the Operation Cassandra agents reached their goal. They discovered a secret organization within Hezbollah in charge of coordinating funding for the war in Syria, and more broadly, all the clandestine military operations led by the party.
We were receiving information about this shadowy group within Hezbollah. And we'd hear things like, oh, they're called the financial unit. They're called the banking unit.
Jack Kelly and the team at Project Cassandra identified a component known as the business affairs component. So we started putting together the pieces of the puzzle using all the experts that we had in the US government.
What's going on here? How do you connect all these dots? You know, it's like trying to solve a mystery. And remember, we have to provide evidence.
Basically, the business affairs components had different things they want to do. They want to move cocaine. They want to launder money. They want to sell or buy weapons.
This business affairs component got hundreds of companies. And we mapped out, we know where those companies are. They're all over the world, even some in the United States. It functioned as this funnel to control all these secret bank accounts all over Lebanon and all over the world, actually. Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Paris.
Business affairs component makes probably over $1 billion a year in criminal proceeds. We have that backed up by records that we got out of Lebanese Canaan Bank.
This is the financing of terror.
We found out that the cocaine proceeds that Nur al-Din was coordinating was under the leadership directly of Adham Tabaja.
Adham Tabaja was one of the main guys involved with the business affairs component.
Tabaja, en fait, c'est l'entrepreneur libanais important qui possède un très gros groupe de construction. Et en fait, dans le dossier, il apparaît parce qu'il est en relation avec Mohamed Noureddin.
Is one of the lead financiers of the rebuilding of Hezbollah neighborhoods and infrastructure in Lebanon after the 2006 war.
And who's the guy who's the money master for them? Well, Abdallah Safi al-Din. We'll call him the financial godfather, certainly, the business godfather.
Abdullah Safi al-Din was Hezbollah's ambassador to Iran. Obviously, Abdullah Safi al-Din had connections in very high levels of the Iranian government.
What Tehran needs Hezbollah to do, Abdallah Safi al-Din runs it. His clan is basically Hezbollah royalty.
Abdallah Safi al-Din has a brother who is the executive director of Hezbollah. And there's rumors that he would be a successor to Nasrallah.
Once you get to their level, you're above being a Hezbollah member. I mean, I know that sounds strange because people are literally saying, well, where's their membership card? I'm like, they don't need a membership card. You know, when someone sees their face, they're like, come right on in, you know, I mean.
So when you find, as US investigators did, Abdullah Safi al-Din involved in illicit financial activities from Iraq to South America to Europe, coming up over and over again, like that gets your attention.
It appeared viable that we could actually make a case against Abdallah Safi al-Din and perhaps arrest him. We could do this if people let us do that.
Operation Cassandra was approaching its moment of truth. If US investigators got the green light to arrest Abdallah Safi al-Din, they would be able to decapitate the hidden leadership of Hezbollah. At the same time, they were hearing a new tune. The United States was starting negotiations on nuclear power with the Islamic Republic of Iran. Yet Iran was Hezbollah's historical sponsor.
Philosophically, Project Cassandra became a problem. Our actions became a problem.
Very good and productive, but still we have lots of work to do. So tomorrow we will continue? Tomorrow we will continue, yes. Okay.
The Iranians started to complain about it in the talks. I've heard this from people who are there. They complained. They said these DEA people are past, you should control them. They're out of control. That's usually what you do want to shut somebody down.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not. A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon. This deal demonstrates that American diplomacy can bring about real and meaningful change. Change that makes our country and the world safer and more secure.
Barack Obama chose to sign peace with Tehran, an agreement hailed by the international community. The ink was barely dry when the Iranian president began a triumphant tour of Europe and stopped in Paris. After the dirty war of the 80s, he came to celebrate the return of business.
Aujourd'hui, le président Rouhani est à Paris. Cela faisait 17 ans qu'un président iranien n'était pas venu ici en France.
The same day, Special Agent Jack Kelly landed in Paris to celebrate the dismantling of Mohammed Noureddin's money laundering network. An official ceremony was organized at the French police headquarters. The DEA was about to reveal the existence of the Corporate Affairs Bureau, a secret organization within Hezbollah.
It was going to be what I really thought was a fitting end to Cassandra. The top French law enforcement official was going to give us a champagne toast as a success for this incredible Operation Cedar under Project Cassandra. So I'm there for that, and then I'm kind of looking at the judge and the prosecutors and the cops, and it's like, what's going on? They're mentioning, yeah, we think the press conference definitely was canceled, and the press release was postponed.
La France et l'Iran, côte à côte, oublions les rancœurs, lance le président Rouhani. Airbus, Peugeot, Vinci, Bouygues et les autres, plusieurs dizaines de milliards de dollars de contrats sont signés.
Une trentaine de contrats signés aujourd'hui pour un potentiel de 15 milliards d'euros. Des accords avec la SNCF, Total, Peugeot, 118 Airbus commandés. Autant de bonnes raisons pour les patrons français d'applaudir chaleureusement le président iranien.
I'm watching it on TV at the bar of the Trocadero Hotel, and I'm getting these calls and text messages saying, yeah, everything's canceled. It was a horrible day. I couldn't believe it. Right at the same time, I'm getting information that either Ali Fayed had been released from the Czech Republic to Lebanon.
O Fayada žádali Spojené státy, které ho vinili z vážných zločinů. Místo za oceán, ale odpoledne Ali Fayad zamířil domů do Libanonu.
Ali Fayed, he went back to Lebanon. We never got him in America. The US government system failed. There was no engagement. So how do you explain that? I know what my investigative gut feeling is telling me. He was a member of Hezbollah, and they were in the middle of an Iran deal. That's my opinion. I don't have the smoking gun, but I have an opinion. I've been doing this a long time. I think the entire Project Cassandra scared many people around the world. It has been sacrificed for politics.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Nice to see you again. Nice to see you. Did you see Brad? Yes.
When I met Asher in 2008, he told me really from the beginning, Jack, I want to tell you right now, ultimately, I can guarantee you that somewhere along the way, the White House, whoever's White House it is going to shut us down. Because if we get to where I think we're going to get, it's going to be too much for some people. And that's exactly what happened to me. And his prediction was true.
You know, I told Jack, the higher up you go, the more people know, the more they're going to want to stop this. Right when we were in the jaws of victory, victory was snatched from us.
And I also knew right at the same time that I'd just been transferred via memo out of Special Operations Division off of Project Cassandra to a desk job at headquarters. So I decided to go to my favorite cafe and drink red wine.
Hezbollah had won. Operation Cassandra, led by the American anti-drug agency, was buried, sacrificed on the altar of realpolitik. The United States had favored the hope of peace with Iran, rather than the dismantling of the hidden face of Hezbollah.
Cassandra was part of Greek mythology, is that she was warning leaders of impending catastrophes and disasters, and her warnings would always get ignored, and then the disasters and catastrophes would eventually happen. So Cassandra was always right, but nobody paid attention to her, and they would dismiss her, and they were skeptical.
What if Operation Cassandra sounded like the final warning? The missed opportunity to end the impunity of the Party of God. Until August the 4th, 2020, the day of the explosion of the port of Beirut, the ground zero of the Lebanese. In the aftermath of the catastrophe, the people turned against their leaders, especially against the all-powerful historic leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah. The Lebanese demanded truth and justice, for once.
Que s'est-il passé précisément? Comment se fait-il que ce stock de nitrate d'ammonium, un stock colossal, 2750 tonnes, qui était entreposé dans un bâtiment du port?
Une substance particulièrement instable. Il s'agit du même produit que celui qui avait causé l'accident dans l'usine AZF de Toulouse en 2001.
بس مين المجرم اللي جاب النترات الأمونيوم؟ مين جابها؟ مين حطها بالمرفأ؟ مين حماها؟
This hangar was controlled by the Hezbollah. This everybody knows, as well as the airport is controlled by Hezbollah.
في بوابة من بوابات المرفأ خاصة لحزب الله، ما حد بده يفتشها، سموها شعبيا بوابة فاطمة. مشان هيك أنا بتصور كل اللبنانيين وكل الأمنيين بيعرفوا تماما حزب الله حكما أقوى من كل الدولة اللبنانية، ما يسترجوه.
Au départ de cette négligence, il y a un crime principal que personne ne veut dévoiler.
$215 dead, 6,500 injured. The day after the explosion, Beirut was scarred and devastated. But Beirut was also angry. Who was responsible for this catastrophe?
The official story is short and simple. There is a ship that came from Georgia to Lebanon. It was supposed to carry on to Mozambique, but it couldn't make it. So they removed the ammonium nitrate and they kept it in the warehouse. This is the story, the official story. Ammonium nitrate is usually used either as a fertilizer or as an explosive. You know, the shipment that came to Lebanon, it was clear even on the bags that it was high density. It was written on the bags. So it was meant to be used as an explosive. So this shipment stayed in the port for 7 years. Unfortunately, everybody knew about it, but nobody took any action. What I discovered during my investigations is, first of all, that Savaro was the company that in the beginning appeared to be the owner of the ammonium nitrate. This company is kind of a shell company, which means it's a company where you don't know the real owner. Later on, I discovered that there are many links between Savaro and Syrian businessmen, Mudalla al-Khouri and Imad Khouri, his brother, and George Haswani.
نحن لا نعرف سرقة سافارو
ولم نسمع بها على الإطلاق إلا من خلال الزوبعة الإعلامية الأخيرة، ولا نعلم أنها مسجلة بنفس عنوان شركتنا. يعلم تمام المعرفة، لا علاقة له لا من قريب ولا من بعيد في هذا الموضوع. ما سبب القلق؟ ليش سبب القلق؟
George Haswani met several times the Syrian president, and Mudallal and Imad Khouri had several companies and factories in Syria and in Russia. In those two countries, it's not easy to reach the level where those guys reached in their business and in their wealth without being close to those in power, whether in Syria or in Russia. Most probably, this shipment was meant to reach in one way or another Syria in the time when the war was at its peak.
الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Studies done by the FBI actually said that according to the calculations they had done, what exploded in the port of Beirut was somewhere between 500 to 700 tons of ammonium nitrate.
Évidemment, si les 2700 tonnes avaient explosé, c'est toute la capitale qui aurait disparu. Mais là, entre-temps, qui a utilisé ces milliers de tonnes? Qui a pu les sortir de Beyrouth, les sortir du Liban?
Je vous pose la question. Qui?
La Syrie et le Hezbollah.
I don't want to get involved in anything political. I hinted for possible links, okay? I was not killed, at least until now.
ومن بيروت ينضم إلينا الباحث السياسي لقمان سليم. أهلا بك.
لقمان سليم also hinted.
لقمان، في لبنان من المتهم الأول بتسهيل ووجود هذه الكمية من نترات الأمونيوم في مرفأ بيروت؟
يا سيدتي، الأمر تحصيل حاصل. المتهم الأول هو صاحب الدالة الكبرى، أعني ميليشيا حزب الله. فيكفي أن يراجع الواحد منا والواحدة.
Luqman made Hezbollah responsible for transporting the ammonium nitrate to Syria. Yeah, he was putting the puzzle together. Today everybody is saying it. In January, Luqman was the first to say it.
بالتالي نحن أمام مشهد أو بازل إن شئتي تكتمل تفاصيله. اليوم بدنا نعرف جيدا من استورد، ولكن أهم من الاستيراد.
La journée d'hier au Liban devait être marquée par les 6 mois après l'explosion du port de Beyrouth, mais c'est un autre drame qui a choqué les Libanais, avec la découverte hier matin du corps d'un célèbre intellectuel, Luqman Slim, plusieurs balles dans la tête, dans sa voiture dans le sud du Liban. Alors pourquoi a-t-on assassiné Luqman Slim? Quel est le message? Les regards se tournent évidemment vers le Hezbollah, qui contrôle étroitement la zone du Liban sud où l'écrivain a été tué.
Do you know how Luqman was killed?
Yes, but I cannot. Yes, he was killed by 6 shots. It seems they have been very professional.
Hello. Moi, je suis vaccinée. Moi aussi. Happy to see you.
Merci, Amar.
Me too. I came several times, but you were. Yes.
Et je suis. Quand l'impression elle est en voyage, elle va revenir. I want justice, and I need to know who did it, who planned it, and who gave the order. With the port explosion and the execution of Lokman, there is something which is broken. No, you cannot go back to normal life. You cannot go back and let the political game win. No, we need, for both, we need accountability.
Will we ever know the truth behind the Beirut port explosion? 2 Lebanese magistrates tried to investigate. They were threatened and their inquiries suspended. As for Hezbollah, in spite of popular protest, it opposes any international inquiry.
Whether the Lebanese people will be able to know the complete truth, I doubt.
Don't even try. It'll never happen. You'll be long in the grave centuries from now, and there will not be an answer to it.
Le Hezbollah ne peut, en même temps, être une armée en guerre contre Israël, une milice déchaînée contre les civils en Syrie et un parti respectable au Liban. Il ne doit pas se croire plus fort qu'il ne l'est. Vous avez un système de terreur qui s'est mis en place et que le Hezbollah a imposé.
Macron put it well. So long as Hezbollah continues to engage in international terrorism, acts of assassination in Lebanon, illicit financial activity, undermining the stability of the Lebanese financial system, so long as Hezbollah engages in all those activities, it is an outlaw actor and needs to be treated as such.
Is history doomed to repeat itself? Is the divine impunity of Hezbollah's leaders really eternal? 40 years ago, it dreamed of imposing Sharia, Islamic law, in Lebanon. Instead, it created a state within the state, Hezbollah land, more powerful than the official state, and swathed the country in a black veil that tastes of ashes.
We are living here in Lebanon in a culture of impunity. You can kill, you can commit massacres, you can commit crimes, you can do whatever you want. In the end, nothing is happening.
What happened to Chekri Harb?
He's out of jail. I know he was in South America, and I think he might have went back to Lebanon, but I'm not sure.
Ayman Juma?
He's never been caught. So he's in Lebanon. I'm sure he travels to other places. We just don't hear about it.
Ali Karoubi?
Ali Karoubi, I don't think, never arrested, not jailed.
Ali Fayed?
Ali Fayed, he's certainly not in jail.
Adam Tabaja?
Adam Tabaja, not in jail.
Safieddine?
Never indicted, never captured, never arrested. Still the Hezbollah ambassador to Tehran, as far as I know.